a story of the dire occurrence of 33 people who lost their lives and 33 families torn apart. The El Faro disaster broke off the world in a tremor. It has been almost 7 years now since El Faro fumed into Hurricane Joaquin, an incident that sunk the vessel and took the lives of the entire crew. So why had the nearly 40-year-old vessel sailed into a storm with no chance of repelling? Why wasn't the ship better maintained? Why wasn't an altered course chosen? The El Faro disaster is the world's most horrific and inexcusable disaster in history. Before we move ahead, make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe right away. Built in 1975 by the Sun Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company, El Faro was launched as Puerto Rico from 1975 till 1991, and later it was prominently known as the Northern Lights till 2006. However, in 2005, it started operating as El Faro until it sank and left the world in a shock. El Faro departed port on 29 September 2015, loaded with 391 shipping containers, a crew of 33 people, and almost 294 trailers along with cars. The ship began its voyage. The tropical weather system formed in the heat of Bahamas Island was exceeding and intensifying its strength. Eventually, the storm system evolved into a Hurricane Joaquin and was working against the weather forecast predictions. Meanwhile, multiple weather updates were sent to El Faro, and the master supervised the ship southward to take a normal route of San Juan. This southern deviation was ascertained to be one of the biggest mistakes in marine history because it, unfortunately, steered the ship close to the intensified hurricane. As soon as El Faro started to undergo heavy winds equated with the hurricane, the vessel upheld for a prolonged time. However, it began taking water into the interior of the ship. At exactly 5:30 a.m. on 1 October 2015, the vessels of the large cargo were completely flooded. Moreover, the engineers of El Faro were toiling to maintain the thrust as the motion of the vessel heightened. The dismaying situation crossed the boundaries when El Faro lost propulsion as soon as the engineers made a turn to shift the vessel. It wasn't the best decision that they took, and that is why the drifting beam started the hurricane force of sea and winds. It was noticeable that El Faro won't make it through the hazardous and severe situation. At 7 a.m., right after 2 hours, the master of El Faro signaled distress using the satellite's communication system because the flooding was uncontrollable. When there was no chance of an outcome or any way out, the master decreed to leave and abandon the ship. By that time, the vessel was close to Hurricane Joaquin, and it had strengthened with high intensity. Meanwhile, rescue teams began their search operations to recognize and analyze the last known position of the vessel. The search operation located that El Faro was located without any survivors. The disaster took the lives of 33 people, and 33 families were broken to the core, a tragedy that left the world in shock. In October 2015, the sinking of El Faro was considered the biggest tragedy for the U.S. Marine. Captain's failures. According to investigation and further reports, right from the beginning of the voyage, wrong decisions were initiated. The captain made a highly wrong decision that put the crew and vessel at a high risk of losing their lives. Majorly, the captain only made a minor course correction to avoid the hurricane. Relying on the outdated weather forecast was another step toward the disaster. Moreover, not working towards returning or changing the course, even after the captain received 3 warning calls from the office about the weather forecast. The most disturbing part of the El Faro disaster is that the captain continuously referred to the outdated weather information. However, the watchmakers on the bridge and routes were well informed about the weather information rather than any satellite radio. Additionally, even after the ship lost its propulsion, the captain stood firm in his belief of expectations that the propulsion would be restored. There was no sign of general alarm, and the captain didn't even muster the crew till the high probability of the disaster. On the other hand, many resources claim that 2 of the crew members of the bridge disagreed with the captain's decision, but unfortunately, he disregarded all the concerns. By that time, It was very obvious that it was either the captain's way or no way. One thing was sure, the assertiveness of bridge resource management and the traditional maritime culture of emphasizing more on captain's authority made things worse. The ineffective implementation of BRM by the TOTE was another mismanagement despite the fact that modernizing was always the rule in technical stuff. However, there were some mishaps by the crew as well. Failures of the crew. It's true that the captain's decision-making and actions played a highly crucial role in the El Faro disaster, but according to the investigation reports, the crew was also part of the mishaps. First of all, TOTE did not provide the proficient protocol and tools for accurate weather observations. The El Faro crew was not knowledgeable about the ship's system. They weren't trained to handle the difficult situation on the ship, and neither did they identify the sources of the flooding. The lack of training and drills resulted in the unpreparedness of the crew to initiate proper actions for survival. Moreover, in the uncertain situation of abandoning the ship, the crew faced cumulative effects of fatigue, anxiety, and vessel motion from the intense weather conditions. This led to the low physical performance of the crew for their duties during the disastrous voyage. Lastly, the ill-equipped and obsolete board ballast tanks restricted the vessel's ability to stabilize in the flooding situation. Lessons from the El Faro disaster. After the El Faro disaster took place, the U.S. Coast Guard came up with an extensive report of recommendations and regulations to avoid any future marine tragedies. U.S. regulations were advised to follow international conventions, technical policies, and consistent revisions of the ventilators and hull openings to avoid a limit of any kind of damage in severe weather conditions. It was also suggested to eliminate any kind of open-top gravity lifeboats. The approval of software was necessary. Moreover, the development of a shipboard emergency alert system was highlighted to communicate directly with the Coast Guard. The responsiveness and effectiveness of the National Weather Service was devised to stay in charge of any storms or instability of the ships. Lastly, a training system for the crew was also initiated to ensure the effectiveness and compliance with the rules and technicalities of the ship. The El Faro disaster, indeed, is one of the biggest tragedies that the world has ever seen in marine history. But the accident caused by Mother Nature was still preventable to save the lives of 33 people. It shows that effective and efficient decision-making plays a substantial part in any dangerous situation. Moreover, in such circumstances, it's always supervised not to act against Mother Nature and the weather forecast. Though there are some lessons to learn, and that is why many efficient strategies were introduced to reduce the risk of any disastrous situations on the ship. Well, that's all for today. What do you think about the El Faro disaster? Was it the captain's fault, the crew's mismanagement, or the system update of the weather? Jot down your replies in the comment section below. With that said, keep watching and liking our videos. Stay tuned for more, and until next time, keep watching.